What's the same and what's different? That's all we want to know. Let's talk about our favorite song. Mary had a little lamb. You know this song. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb, and all the rest of it. Let's talk about what happens in the song. Let's talk about what's the same and what's different as we move through the song. And let's just start with this much of the song. Mary had a little lamb. So one of the things that's the same is it seems like Mary had a little. It seems like all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all 6 of those syllables have the same rhythm. And what does that mean? What do we mean rhythm? Well, there's a couple things about them that are the same. One of them is how long each of the notes are. They're all pretty short, right? Like Mary had a little lamb. Lamb is a little longer, and there's a little more space before the next line, right? Because after this, it says little lamb again. And we're like, Mary had a little lamb, little lamb. It's kind of like there's like a little blank spot there. We'll learn about that. It's called a rest. So Mary had a little lamb, little lamb. Let's talk about that rhythm. If they're all the same, let's just make a little picture of it. Mary had a little lamb. Then I'm going to put that one in parentheses. Little lamb, one in parentheses, because there is also a little comma there. Okay. This isn't that different than what we do when we write, actual music with notes and stuff. It's the same basic idea. What we're doing is we're showing on this horizontal axis, we're showing time. We're showing how time unfolds, and with each one of these dashes, we're representing, like, for each note, we're representing the attack of that note. It's kind of violent, but that's what we call the onset of a note. Attack of a note. And then I'm kind of also showing what we might call the release of a note. And there's a whole kind of aspect of musical vocabulary about the specific ways you attack and release notes that we call articulation, and that is a big tangent. Let's get back to these lines. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. So what's the same and what's different? One thing we've already figured out that we have the same and different are we have all these equal time points, equal rhythms, equal beats, but then what's different is some of them have notes on them and some of them have rests. So a rest is just like a note, except it doesn't make any sound. So that's the best way to think of a rest. Don't think of it as just empty space. Think of it as a note, but a note that is silent, because it's always occupying the same space where the notes live, right? Notes live in time, and rests live in time too, and rests are just like notes, except they don't make a sound. Mary had a little lamb. Let's try and feel that rhythm a little more. Let's tap it out. Let's go nice and slow. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Kind of feeling these little taps. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb. Just get to there. No, I want to write this down here. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb. Okay, so here's a picture of what we call, in music, we call it a pulse. A pulse, much like the ones we have in our bodies, is kind of this recurring pattern of time points, right? Your pulse stays pretty steady. It can speed up or slow down, but what makes it stay a pulse is it isn't random. There's always more or less equal distance between each time point. And in fact, if you don't have that, then you have heart arrhythmia, and you should go see a doctor. But usually your pulse will remain fairly constant. It can speed up, but the proportion of the relationship of the notes stays the same. In music, pulse is a huge part of our experience of music, and we don't experience pulse on just one level. We almost always are experiencing it on multiple levels. And if you've ever heard of the term deep grooves, someone is really feeling a rhythm, some tribally, jungly beat at some rave or something, that's what we're talking about. Multiple pulses. There's all kinds of weird ways pulses can go. One of the most normal ways follows the accent of the text. Mary had a little lamb. Little lamb. All those are more accented. And so, since every other syllable has another accent, what we actually end up having is this other level of pulse, right? We're feeling Mary had a little lamb, but we're also feeling this top level of pulse here. Mary had a little lamb, right? And I think the way it sounds when I sing it in my head, Mary had a little lamb. I feel like there's an even slower level of pulse. So there's other layer of pulse up here. I'll try and stomp it with my foot so you can hear it. So it's like, Mary had a little lamb, right? We could probably go to an even wider level of pulse. I'm sure if you sing the whole song, Mary had a little lamb, Mary had a little lamb. I bet the 2 times you say Mary have a level of pulse that's maybe another layer or 2 up here. And we could also feel way faster pulses, right? Like Mary had a little lamb. This whole pulse thing is this continuum of pulse streams that we can feel all kinds of cool patterns, kind of where our attention kind of swims around between whether it's paying attention to the big beat or to the little beat or to the divisions of the beat. It's part of why we love music. Okay. You might have noticed that what we have here is this repeating pattern. 3 pulse levels stacked up, 1, 2 stacked up, 1, and then it repeats. And then it repeats again. This is something in music we call meter. In music, part of rhythm is what we talked about earlier, duration. So how long a note lasts between its attack and its release. But another part of how we talk about musical rhythm is meter. And meter is how notes kind of fit into these kind of patterns of hierarchically nested and stacked levels of pulse. Different streams, we can call them, of time points, right? And that's really how to think of these. This is kind of like, regardless of what actual notes are happening, when music is in a certain meter, the time even of the parts of the music you haven't heard yet are kind of the time is pre-contoured. It's almost like the time is like has these little grooves already sliced in it where notes fall or don't fall. And a lot of what we love is when the meter is being challenged by the actual notes or stuff like that. The way meter works, though, is it gives us this kind of rule, this guideline, and then the actual notes of the music can go against the guideline or go with the guideline. And that's something to keep in mind about music rules. They're not telling you what to do. They're giving you a guideline by which you can measure things. It in no way is a value judgment. Imagine how boring music would be if no matter what, you always had to follow this exact accent pattern. Yeah, it would be boring. It would be boring. Okay, Mary Had a Little Lamb. We've gotten to here. Let's talk in our remaining 3.5 minutes about how we would notate this. We'll get into a lot more detail, but basically what we have here is a kind of meter we call a quadruple meter. You can tell because for each one of these repeating patterns, every repetition of the pattern, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, right? 4 beats. A quadruple meter has 4 beats. A triple meter has 3 beats. A duple meter has 2 beats. A lot of music that we have is in this particular meter. We call it 4/4. When we write a meter, it's like a number over another number. We'll get into more detail. And in 4/4, there are 4 beats, and these beats are all quarter notes. And in 4/4, the first quarter note of the measure tends to be strong, the second weak, the third medium, and the fourth weak. In other words, strong in dot language, strong, weak, medium, weak, right? So if you just see this, if you just see 4/4 at the beginning of a piece of music, what you already know is that it's going to be like this. The way you're going to interpret is based off the rule of a grid that is like this. It doesn't mean the music is going to necessarily this, but it means in 4/4 time, you're going to pre-know that the contour of the time at which you are going to play your notes is going to have this texture. Far out, right? That seems a good place to stop. And we will get into note values next time. Sneak preview. These guys are called quarter notes. And the reason they're called quarter notes is because of stuff that we will talk about in the future. Goodbye.